I never thought my parents' 40th anniversary would be the day everything fell apart. There I was, wearing the cream silk dress I'd saved 3 months to afford, when my 7-year-old nephew Tommy came barreling across the country club dining room. "Here's your drink, Aunt Rachel," he yelled, just before tripping and sending a full glass of Cabernet down my front. The room went silent. Then Tommy, looking up with those big eyes, said loudly, "It's okay, Mom said you don't matter anyway." That's when I knew this perfectly orchestrated celebration was about to become something else entirely. My sister Kate's horrified expression confirmed it. The words weren't just a child's mistake, they were her words in his mouth. 38 years of being the family afterthought crystallized in that moment. What nobody knew was that I'd discovered something 3 weeks earlier, something that would explain why I'd always been treated like I was less than everyone else, something I wasn't supposed to know, something that would change everything about this picture-perfect anniversary and our family forever. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Richard, built his accounting firm from scratch, and my mother, Eleanor, was the quintessential New England hostess. Charity committees, garden club, and dinner parties where everything matched down to the napkin rings. They were fixtures in our community, admired and respected. My sister Kate is 5 years older, and from my earliest memories, she was the golden child. Kate with her perfect grades, Kate with her field hockey trophies, Kate who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was always the sensitive one, which was really code for difficult, emotional, not quite right. When I was 8, I made a Mother's Day card in art class. I'd worked on it for a week, using watercolors and my best handwriting. Mom opened it at breakfast, smiled politely, and set it aside. That afternoon, I found it in the recycling bin, while Kate's construction paper card was prominently displayed on the refrigerator. When I asked why, Mom patted my head and said, "Honey, we just don't have room for everything." But there was plenty of room. Kate's school papers and awards covered every surface. By high school, the pattern was set. Kate married her college sweetheart Ryan at 23. The wedding was featured in Connecticut magazine. Their reception was at the Greenwich Country Club, with 300 guests and a band flown in from New Orleans. When I graduated from Tufts with honors in journalism 2 years later, my parents sent a check with a note saying they were tied up with commitments that weekend. I moved to Boston, built a successful career as a digital marketing consultant, and created a life away from the constant comparisons. I'd visit for major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners, playing my role in the family performance, the quirky younger daughter who couldn't quite measure up but was tolerated with benevolent condescension. Then Kate and Ryan had Tommy, and my parents transformed into doting grandparents. Eleanor, who had never baked a cookie in my childhood, now sent weekly care packages of homemade treats to Tommy. Richard, who missed my college graduation, never missed Tommy's t-ball games, a 90-minute drive each way. I accepted this reality. I built my own chosen family of friends. I dated, though nothing serious stuck. My therapist suggested I had attachment issues related to parental emotional neglect, which seemed about right. Then came the grand gesture. My parents' 40th anniversary was approaching, and Kate decided we should throw them a lavish party at the same country club where they'd been married. "We'll split the cost," she said during one of our monthly phone calls. I agreed, though I knew splitting meant differently to Kate than to me. Sure enough, when the invoices arrived, my portion was exactly half, despite Kate and Ryan earning 3 times what I did. I took on extra consulting projects, worked weekends, and made it happen. Not because I expected acknowledgement, but because some part of me still craved approval, still thought if I just did enough, tried hard enough, they might finally see me. 3 weeks before the anniversary party, I was at my parents' house, helping Mom sort through old photographs for a display board. Kate was supposed to be there too, but Tommy had a cold, so naturally she was excused. I was in the attic, going through dusty albums, when I found a weathered blue folder tucked between two photo boxes. Inside was a stack of legal documents, adoption papers. My adoption papers. I sat there, cross-legged on the attic floor, reading and rereading the documents. I wasn't their biological child. I'd been adopted at 3 months old. There was a birth certificate with my original name, Rachel Marie Winters, and paperwork from Catholic Charities of Hartford. Everything suddenly made sense. The different treatment, the emotional distance, why I never quite belonged. The strangest part? I felt relief. There was a reason. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I wasn't theirs. Not really. Not in the way Kate was. I tucked the papers into my bag and went downstairs, heart pounding. Mom was arranging photos on the dining room table, carefully selecting which moments of family history deserved to be remembered. "Find anything good?" she asked without looking up. "Just some old Christmas photos," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Nothing special." That night, I drove back to Boston with the folder on my passenger seat like a time bomb. I didn't confront them then. I needed time to process, to decide what this meant for me, for us. Meanwhile, the anniversary preparations continued, and I played my part, all while carrying this secret that was rewriting my entire life story. The day of the anniversary party arrived, a perfect New England September Saturday with that golden light that makes everything look like a Ralph Lauren advertisement. I'd driven down from Boston the night before, staying at a hotel rather than at my parents' house. I needed the space, the separation between learning my truth and facing them with it. I arrived at the Greenwich Country Club at noon, 5 hours before the event. Kate had insisted we both be there early to oversee setup. The grand ballroom overlooked the golf course, with French doors opening onto a stone terrace. White roses and hydrangeas covered every surface, my mother's favorites. A string quartet was setting up in the corner. The place cards were hand calligraphed. "You're late," Kate said when I walked in. She was wearing a navy sheath dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her highlighted blonde hair arranged in a perfect chignon. "It's noon. We agreed on noon," I replied, setting down my garment bag containing the cream silk dress I'd splurged on. "I've been here since 11. There were issues with the centerpieces." She frowned at my garment bag. "Is that what you're wearing?" I ignored the question. For 2 decades, I'd let these comments slide, but today they scraped against my raw nerves. I busied myself checking the photo displays, carefully curated family moments that showed us as the perfect Connecticut family. I noticed there were considerably fewer photos of me than of Kate, and almost none from the first 3 months of my life. Of course. People started arriving at 5 p.m. My parents made their entrance at 5:30, Mom resplendent in a silver gown, Dad distinguished in his tuxedo. They looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, the ideal couple celebrating 40 years of marriage, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and country club acquaintances. I watched from the sidelines as they circulated, accepting congratulations. Mom touched Dad's arm as she laughed at something a friend said, and I wondered, did they ever plan to tell me? Was I ever going to know the truth if I hadn't found those papers? During the cocktail hour, I nursed a single glass of champagne while maintaining my smile. Kate worked the room like a politician, making sure everyone knew she'd organized most of the celebration. Ryan followed in her wake, handsome and affable as always, occasionally checking his phone, probably the baseball scores. Tommy, their son, raced around with 2 other children from the club families, their small dress shoes skidding on the polished floor. He was the spitting image of Kate, same blue eyes, same determined set to his jaw. "Rachel, there you are." It was my mother's oldest friend, Margaret Whitfield, air-kissing both my cheeks. "What are you up to these days? Still doing that computer thing?" "Digital marketing consulting, yes. I just landed Massachusetts General Hospital as a client." "How nice," Margaret said, clearly unimpressed. "Did Kate tell you that Tommy was accepted into the Greenwood Academy kindergarten program? Only 5 years old and already on the fast track. Your sister is such a wonderful mother." I nodded politely, but inside I was calculating. If I'd been adopted at 3 months, that meant Eleanor wasn't even my biological mother. Had she resented me from the beginning? Was I a consolation prize when they couldn't have another biological child after Kate? Dinner was announced, and we moved into the ballroom. I was seated at the family table, of course, between my father's brother, Uncle James, and Kate's college roommate, Melissa, who'd flown in from Chicago. Mom and Dad were at the center, with Kate and Ryan flanking them. Tommy was supposed to be at the children's table, but he'd pitched a fit, so naturally, they'd squeezed him in next to his mother. The speeches began after the salad course. Kate went first, standing with her champagne flute, telling polished anecdotes about our parents' perfect marriage, their unwavering support, how they'd been role models for her own family. "And Dad," she concluded, her voice catching artfully, "when you walked me down the aisle, you whispered that no man would ever be good enough for your little girl, but that Ryan came close. That's the kind of father you've always been, protective, loving, our biggest champion." The room applauded. I stared at my plate, remembering how my father had missed my college graduation because of a golf tournament. Then it was my turn. I'd prepared remarks, appropriate, grateful, forgettable, but as I stood, those words evaporated. I looked at my parents, these strangers who'd raised me but never quite claimed me, and felt something shift inside me. "My earliest memory," I began, my voice steadier than I expected, "is of trying to get my parents' attention." I saw my mother's smile tighten almost imperceptibly. I was 4, and I'd drawn a picture of our family. I kept tugging on Mom's sleeve while she was talking to a neighbor, and eventually she turned to me and said, "Rachel, important people are talking." An awkward chuckle rippled through the room. This wasn't the warm, fuzzy speech they were expecting. I continued. "It took me a long time to understand that in our family, some people were important and some weren't. Some belonged naturally, and some had to earn their place. Some were chosen first, and others were—" I paused, the word adopted on the tip of my tongue. But before I could say it, there was a commotion. Tommy had gotten up from his seat and was running toward the dessert table where the anniversary cake waited. Kate called after him, but he was focused on the chocolate fountain nearby. He grabbed a crystal glass from a waiter's tray, clearly intending to fill it with chocolate. "Tommy, no!" Kate called, but he was already on his way back, weaving between tables with the glass, now filled with red wine he'd snagged from somewhere. "Here's your drink, Aunt Rachel," he called, proud of himself for this grown-up gesture. I turned just as he tripped on the edge of the carpet. The wine seemed to fly in slow motion, a perfect arc of deep red against my cream silk dress. The cold shock of it hit my chest, spreading instantly across the expensive fabric. The room went silent. Tommy looked up at me, his face crumpling in that way that meant a tantrum was imminent. "It's okay," he said loudly, repeating what he must have heard. "Mom said you don't matter anyway." The silence that followed Tommy's words was absolute. 200 people, frozen in mid-bite, mid-sip, mid-conversation. The string quartet's music hung in the air, then trailed off as the musicians sensed the tension. Kate's face drained of color. "Tommy, that's not— I never—" She rushed forward, grabbing his arm. "Apologize to your aunt right now." But Tommy, confused by the sudden tension, began to cry. "But you did say it, Mommy. You told Daddy that Aunt Rachel doesn't matter because she's not really family." My father cleared his throat, attempting damage control. "Kids say the darndest things," he laughed awkwardly. "Let's get back to celebrating, shall we? Rachel, there's a restroom where you can clean up." "Not really family?" I repeated, the words echoing in my head. The wine was seeping through my dress, cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. Is that because I'm adopted, Dad? Is that why I've never really mattered as much as Kate? The room went from uncomfortable silence to shocked murmurs. My mother stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled backward. "Rachel," she hissed, "this is neither the time nor the place." "When is the time, Mom? It's been 38 years. When exactly were you planning to tell me that I'm not your biological daughter? Or was I never supposed to know?" Kate's eyes widened. She looked from our mother to me. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the folded documents I'd brought with me, my insurance policy, my proof. "I found these in the attic 3 weeks ago, my adoption papers. Catholic Charities of Hartford, 1987. Apparently, I was Rachel Marie Winters before I became Rachel Elizabeth Anderson." I held the papers up, then set them on the table in front of my parents. 40 years of marriage, 38 years of lies. My father's face had gone ashen. My mother's was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "We were going to tell you when you were older," she said, her voice low and intense. "But you were always so sensitive, so emotional. We didn't think you could handle it." I was 6 when I asked why there were no baby pictures of me before 3 months. I was 12 when I asked why I had brown eyes when everyone else in the family had blue. I was 16 when my biology teacher explained Punnett squares, and I realized 2 blue-eyed parents couldn't have a brown-eyed child. My voice was rising now, decades of questions pouring out. Every time you deflected, you lied. Kate was staring at the documents, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth. "Mom? Dad? Is this true?" My father nodded slowly. "Your mother couldn't have more children after you, Kate. We wanted another child. It was supposed to be a blessing for all of us." "A blessing?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Is that why I've spent my entire life feeling like I was never quite good enough? Why my accomplishments were always second-rate compared to Kate's? Why I was the sensitive one instead of the real one?" Margaret Whitfield was openly gaping now. Uncle James was studying his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. Ryan had pulled Tommy onto his lap, whispering something in his ear. "We gave you everything," my mother said, her voice trembling with rage or maybe fear. "A beautiful home, the best schools." "You gave me things," I corrected her. "You never gave me the truth. You never gave me belonging." I turned to Kate, whose shock seemed genuine. "Did you know?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I swear, Rachel, I didn't know." She looked stricken, perhaps realizing how her casual comment to her husband that I didn't really matter because I wasn't really family had been overheard and repeated by her impressionable son. "Well, now everyone knows," I said, looking around at the sea of shocked faces, friends, neighbors, colleagues who'd known my family for decades. The perfect Anderson family has a secret. The second daughter isn't really an Anderson at all. I grabbed my wine-soaked purse. "Congratulations on 40 years of marriage and 38 years of collective lies." I turned to leave, but my mother caught my arm. Her fingers dug into my skin. "Rachel, don't you dare walk out. You're making a scene," she hissed. I looked down at her hand, then up at her face. This woman who had raised me but had always held something back, some essential maternal connection that I'd spent my life trying to earn. "You know what, Mom? For once in my life, I don't care what you think. I don't care about making a scene. I don't care about embarrassing you in front of your country club friends. For once, I matter more than your perfect image." I pulled my arm free and walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, and into the September evening. Behind me, I could hear my father calling my name, my mother's controlled voice trying to salvage the situation, and the rising buzz of 200 people processing the most dramatic thing they'd witnessed at the Greenwich Country Club since someone's husband ran off with the tennis pro in 1998. I made it to my car before the tears came. Not sad tears, relieved ones. The truth was finally out. I was finally free. As I fumbled for my keys, I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. "Rachel, wait." It was my father, his tuxedo jacket flapping open, his bow tie askew. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the country club lights harsh on his face. "I think we've said everything that needs to be said," I replied, pressing the unlock button on my key fob. "No," his voice cracked. "We haven't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the adoption papers I'd left on the table. "These don't tell the whole story." "They tell enough." "Please," he said, and something in his voice, a vulnerability I'd never heard before, made me pause. 5 minutes. I leaned against my car, arms crossed over my wine-stained dress. "I'm listening." "Not here," he said, glancing back at the country club. "Can we sit in your car?" Inside the quiet cocoon of my sedan, my father seemed to deflate. His hands, always so steady, so certain when signing checks or shaking important hands, trembled slightly as he unfolded the papers. "Your mother, Eleanor, she wanted another baby so badly after Kate. We tried for years, 3 miscarriages. The doctors finally said it wasn't going to happen." He stared out the windshield. "It nearly broke her." I said nothing, waiting. Then a colleague mentioned Catholic Charities. We applied, went through the process. When they called about a baby girl, we were ecstatic. He paused. "But Eleanor, she struggled. Post-adoption depression, they call it now. Back then, no one talked about it. She was supposed to feel nothing but joy, but instead she felt disconnected. That doesn't explain 38 years of secrecy." "No," he sighed. "That was my fault. I thought if we just never mentioned the adoption, it would be like you were always ours. Eleanor would bond naturally. The disconnect would fade. But it didn't. It got better, but by then, the lie was in place. The longer we went without telling you, the harder it seemed to find the right moment. So we just didn't." We sat in silence for a moment. "I loved you from the first moment I held you," he said quietly. "You had this serious little face, like you were already thinking great thoughts. I imagined walking you down the aisle someday, bouncing your children on my knee. But I failed you, Rachel. I let Eleanor's struggle become your burden. I was a coward." A tap on the window made us both jump. It was Kate, her perfect chignon now slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. I rolled down the window. "The party must be going great. Mom's telling everyone you had an allergic reaction to the wine, and the emotional outburst was part of it," Kate said. "Half of them are too drunk to question it. The other half are loving the drama." She looked at our father. "Ryan's trying to keep things going, but I'll go back in," he said, reaching for the door handle. "Dad," I stopped him. "Who were my birth parents?" He looked at the papers in his hands. "We don't know much. Your birth mother was very young, 18, a college freshman. That's all they told us." "Did she name me Rachel?" He nodded. "Rachel Marie. We kept your first name, gave you Elizabeth after my mother. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Some thread of connection to my original identity had been preserved." "Go back to the party," I told him. "We'll talk more tomorrow." After he left, Kate slid into the passenger seat. We sat in silence, the sounds of distant laughter and music from the country club floating through the night air. "I really didn't know," she finally said. "I believe you. What Tommy said." She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. "It wasn't exactly what I said. Ryan and I were arguing about the cost of this party. I said something like, 'Rachel doesn't even feel like part of the family sometimes. Why are we spending so much money to impress her?' It was awful, and I'm ashamed, but I never said you don't matter." "But you thought it." She didn't deny it. "I always thought you had it easier. You got to escape, build your own life in Boston. I stayed, carried all their expectations." I laughed humorously. "I didn't escape, Kate. I was exiled. There's a difference." She looked at me then, really looked at me maybe for the first time. "I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything." It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next day, my parents came to my hotel. We sat in the sterile conference room, three people connected by legal documents and decades of complicated emotions. My mother brought a photo album I'd never seen before, pictures of my adoption day, my first week home, documents about my birth mother that they'd kept hidden. Her name was Sophia Winters, my mother said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. She was a freshman at Yale. That's all we know. The name electrified me. Sophia. I had come from someone named Sophia. "Why are you sharing this now?" I asked. "Because you deserve to know," my father said, "and because we don't want to lose you." My mother looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "I didn't know how to love you at first," she admitted. "It terrified me. By the time I figured it out, we'd established patterns that were hard to break. But Rachel," her voice caught, "you are my daughter. Biology be damned." It wasn't the perfect Hollywood reconciliation. There were no tearful hugs or instant forgiveness. But it was honest. Perhaps the first truly honest conversation we'd ever had as a family. 2 weeks later, I hired a private investigator. Within a month, he'd found her, Sophia Winters, now Dr. Sophia Winters Castillo, a pediatric surgeon in Philadelphia, married with 3 children of her own. Our first meeting was at a cafe, halfway between Philadelphia and Boston. She had my eyes, my curly hair. She'd been following my career through LinkedIn for years, too nervous to make contact, but too invested to stay completely away. "I never wanted to give you up," she told me, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "But I was 18, on scholarship, first in my family to go to college. My parents would have disowned me." It was 1987. The options were different then. She had written me letters every birthday for 18 years, never sending them, but keeping them in a box. She gave them to me that day, a history of what might have been, a mother's heart poured onto paper. In the months that followed, my world expanded. I gained half-siblings, a stepfather who welcomed me warmly, and a birth mother who filled in the missing pieces of my identity puzzle. My brown eyes came from her. My love of writing was shared by her father, my grandfather, who'd been a journalist. With my adoptive family, we entered therapy. Progress was slow, painful, necessary. Eleanor tried, in her way. Sometimes she succeeded, sometimes old patterns reasserted themselves. Richard made more consistent efforts, calling weekly, asking questions about my life that he'd never bothered with before. Kate and I developed a fragile new relationship. She admitted her jealousy when our parents suddenly seemed more interested in me after the revelation. "Welcome to my entire childhood," I told her, not unkindly. Tommy, innocent catalyst that he was, became our bridge. I took him to Red Sox games when I visited Connecticut, building a relationship with him separate from the family drama. The most unexpected change came 6 months after the anniversary debacle. I was offered a job heading digital strategy for a major healthcare network in Philadelphia. I took it, moving to be closer to Sophia and her family. My apartment was halfway between her suburban home and the city center, a geographical representation of my new in-between identity. At Thanksgiving, I hosted both families, the Andersons and the Winters Castillos, in my new place. It was awkward, beautiful, real. Eleanor brought her famous cranberry relish. Sophia brought family photo albums to show me where I came from. My half-siblings taught Tommy a complicated card game. Richard and Sophia's husband, Carlos, discovered a shared passion for jazz. As for the grand gesture, the expensive anniversary party that had been the stage for our family's public unraveling, it became something of a legend at the Greenwich Country Club. My parents, surprisingly, didn't try to hide what had happened. We adopted our younger daughter and made the mistake of not telling her, my father would say simply when asked. "We're working on making amends." The unexpected twist in all of this came when, during my research into my adoption, I discovered that Catholic Charities of Hartford had placed dozens of babies with wealthy Connecticut families in the 1980s, all with minimal information about birth parents. Some of these adoptions, a lawyer friend suggested, skirted ethical and legal boundaries. I started a support group for adoptees from this era, which grew into an advocacy organization working for adoption record transparency in Connecticut. A year after the wine-stained revelation, I stood in my Philadelphia apartment, looking at the framed photos on my wall. My chosen family of friends from Boston, my birth family with their warm Latino gatherings, and yes, the Andersons, still complicated, but now honest about our shared history. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, confirming our weekend plans. My laptop showed an email from Richard, asking for my thoughts on a retirement property in Philadelphia. I was no longer trying to belong to a family that couldn't fully claim me. Instead, I'd created a constellation of connections that allowed me to be my whole, complex self, Rachel Marie Winters Anderson, a woman with two beginnings and multiple homes. Standing here today, 2 years after that wine-splattered moment of truth, I sometimes wonder how different my life would have been if Tommy hadn't tripped, if I'd never found those papers, if I'd kept playing my assigned role in the Anderson family mythology. But the path to authenticity is rarely straight or comfortable. The truth is, family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you anyway. Sometimes those people share your DNA. Sometimes they share your history. Sometimes they're the ones you find along the way. I'm still healing, still learning to tell my story without shame or anger. I have 2 mothers now, one who chose to let me go so I could have opportunities she couldn't provide, and one who chose to take me in but couldn't quite figure out how to love me as herself. Both choices shaped me. Both women matter. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt like you didn't quite belong, or if you're holding on to a truth that's burning to be spoken, I want you to know that the other side of that difficult conversation might be freedom. It might be messy, public, and painful, but authenticity usually is. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family reckonings and personal discovery. And if you're brave enough, share your own story in the comments below. Sometimes speaking your truth helps someone else find theirs.